This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Doranal, Brian Nehemiah, and Daddy Warpig. We are back. That's right, Geek Gab every Sunday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 1 hour of anything geekish goes. Today is the Fantasy Festival, all things fantasy. We're going to be talking about Seventh Son, the movie. We're going to be talking about One Bright Star to Guide Them, a novella by John C. Wright. We're going to be talking about a Patrick Rothfuss novella, The Slow Regard of Silent Things. And from the video game spectrum, we're going to be talking about Hearthstone and Dragon Age Inquisition. As always, the three geeks coming to you live, so if you are in the chat, please feel free to ask us questions about whatever it is we happen to be talking about today. I'm going to pause for a second and let my hosts get a word in edgewise. How are you feeling, Doranal?
I'm feeling good. It's a good day. It's a glorious day out here in parts unknown, and I'm feeling the geek.
See, Brian, this is when you're supposed to talk, so people don't just have to listen to me giggling.
But I like to listen to you giggle. I find it very cute. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Yeah.
Doranal, by the way, was doing something kind of on topic before we kicked off the show today. Why don't you tell everybody exactly what it was you were telling me?
Oh, gosh, which one? So we just today I was checking out. There's a Hearthstone tournament on Twitch TV, and it's just I'm watching people play a video game, and I enjoy it. I never thought I'd say that.
And it's the ESL Championship?
Yeah, ESL Championship something. What's cool about it is it's well, there's a lot of things cool about it. It sounds like the worst thing ever, but it's actually great. I think they're calling it the Legendary Series. And so what they've got is they've got honest-to-God producers, and they've got actual production quality, but they've also hired on I almost want to say amateurs, because they've got people who stream, actual players doing the commentary and everything. There's a pretty well-known guy, goes by the name of Rainad. He's a popular commenter. But also they've got another guy named Frodan who's more of a commenter than an actual player. He plays too, but I don't know. It's cool to see this sort of like they're gonna be big boys one day. They're gonna have honest to goodness like television quality productions. It's all watching people play video games.
Twitch just got bought for like $900 million, or it was $990 million, some insane number. And so there are companies out there who seriously see this broadcasting of video games, watching other people play video games, as a serious media competitor, as a serious entry into media, which, I do find that a little bit odd. I can't actually, living where I live on the ass end of a super long digital connection, I've got the digital connection. If you can imagine fiber optic connection as a giant majestic river coming down the mountainside, bringing millions of gallons of water to hungry people everywhere, that's a fiber optic connection. My internet connection can be likened to that little water tube in a hamster's cage. That's what my internet connection is like. So I don't have enough bandwidth to even watch Twitch, let alone broadcast on Twitch. People have asked me, hey, why don't you get on and do streaming? And I'm like, well, the reason why I don't get on and do streaming is because it would be quicker for me to record myself on my computer, physically save it to a disk, and walk it over to the ISP than it would be for me to try and stream it. So that's why I don't do Twitch. I just don't have the bandwidth.
That sucks. But speaking of video games as a spectator sport, it kind of reminds me how, like, 10 years ago, ESPN would have Magic the Gathering tournaments on at like 2 a.m. Remember that?
I remember that. I saw that. I don't know if it was a replay or it was live, but that famous scene where the guy pulls the Armageddon into his hand and he says "Gott Dämmerung," and the guy just like he table flips right there. He just concedes. I watched that on cable TV. I'm like, what? Don't they know this is for nerds? Why are they showing this on ESPN?
All right, so here's we know what's coming up, and we're gonna be starting today with the Fantasy Festival. We're gonna be starting with One Bright Star to guide them, because one of the people that I have talked with before, and Brian has talked with before, is John C. Wright, who is a best-selling author. He's a great author. We're going to talk about his work because there's nothing more endearing for a professional writer to hear schmucks who haven't had a novel published talking about their work. Nothing makes them happier to hear the opinions of, people like us. And so he has promised that if I send him a link to the show, that he would listen to the show. So I'm being polite and sticking his stuff at the beginning so that he can listen to the beginning and then decide if he wants to hear us talk trash about Rothfuss and the movie and the video games we're going to get to later. So this is a courtesy to a best-selling author who has agreed to at least listen to the show. So One Bright Star to guide them. I know Brian has read this, and usually I start these off and do a big long spiel, and then you guys ask questions or give your opinion. So we're going to do it a little bit differently today. I'm going to let Brian do the big long spiel because I know he's actually prepared for it, even though he wasn't expecting it. I know he's prepared to do it. He has the knowledge resident in his brain to do it. I'm going to let him do the spiel while I quietly sip some water.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Wait, I'll come in again. Yeah, so One Bright Star to guide them. John C. Wright novella published by Castalia House and eligible for a Hugo nomination, I might add. Shameless plug.
I have nominated it for the Hugo.
Good man. That's what we need more of. Yeah, so, now full disclosure, I plan to as well. But synopsis. So, the best description I heard of this was in a custom review on Amazon, and it's that One Bright Star to guide them succeeds in doing for the Chronicles of Narnia what Hook boldly attempted to do for Peter Pan. So, what you have here is there were 4 children, Tommy, Richard, Sally, and Penny, growing up in England, who went through a magical portal as children and wound up in a magical fantasy land where they battled the forces of the Winter King and were made royalty. And well, now it's like 20, 30 years later, and they've come home and they've grown up. And their fanciful childhood adventures are now remembered only as perhaps waking dreams or figments of their imagination, but they've taken a back seat to the necessities of getting up and going to work and paying your mortgage on time and perhaps going down to the pub for a few rounds of drinks and going to bed early because you got a meeting in the morning. Well, that all changes when Tommy is approached by what seems to be an ordinary cat with a key around its neck, and soon find out that it is not what it seems. It is, in fact, a messenger from the magical kingdom that they saved as kids, asking them to help defeat the Knight of Ghosts and Shadows, who is attempting to extend his evil reign into our world. So, Tommy, of course, in the customary initial steps of the hero's journey, refuses the call, only to have it made exceedingly plain to him that, due to what's at stake, he doesn't really have a choice here. So, he initially reluctantly takes back up the fallen banner of his childhood adventures, but in time hits his stride and becomes what to all other proper middle class Londoners would be a raving, derelict, homeless guy, probably with schizophrenia. Like Jules says from Pulp Fiction, he's basically started walking the earth like Kane from Kung Fu, and in the process of this quest. So he goes around, tends to gather his former schoolmates, and one by one discovers that they are either they've become wholly worldly, they've sold out, in some cases, to the enemy. So they've either turned traitor or they're too afraid, too comfortable in their lives to go with him for one reason or another. He ends up pretty much having to go it alone and confronts mind-numbing fantastical terrors from another world, and of course, like all true heroes, discovers the true strength residing inside him to confront and defeat evil. So, if I tell you anything else, I risk major spoilers, but it is an outstanding fantasy story that will easily feed your need for just good, honest, Tolkien-esque, Lewis-esque fantasy.
My primary comment on the novel, which I have heard is not unusual, is this. It's novella. It's not an actual... It shares a really strange quality with the next book we're going to talk about, which is The Slow Regard of Silent Things, in that it isn't actually a typical adventure story novel, despite the summary Brian has so ably given. It is as if you had a full-length novel and somebody went along in the full-length novel and chopped out 7 pieces of it, primarily the confrontational, talking, having your character challenged, facing temptation pieces, and then took all of the wilderness journeying, all of the combat, all of the, action stuff, and got rid of it, and then just took those 7 mostly talky bits and put them together and sold that as a novella. That's what it's like. And I understand the artistic goal, at least I think I do, as much as I can. John C. Wright, and this is why I'm going to say that, John C. Wright is an imposing writer. He is, I swear to God, 50 to 75 years too late. His writing style is erudite. He uses a lot of obscure words, and not needlessly, not to be pretentious, but because that's his vocabulary. That's who he is. That's how he writes all the time. When he's writing a tiny little blog post to toss it off, he uses this kind of language. And it's very imposing, and it's very much out of character with modern books, which tend to be simplified, tend to have a very much smaller vocabulary and not have so many long, multi-syllable words. So when you're looking at the book, you have to understand the words, then understand the language, then try to glean a glimpse of the thinking behind it. So if I could go through those 3 steps and glean a glimpse of the thinking behind what he was doing when he wrote One Bright Star, is this. He seems to have felt like the implicit ending of the Chronicles of Narnia was too simplistic, suitable for children's tales, which is what the Chronicles of Narnia are. But growing up, I'll take the character of Susan. Susan shows up in the very first Chronicle of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then in the second one, Prince Caspian doesn't come back with them because she started using makeup and started growing up and started noticing boys and going on dates and stuff, and so she's not suitable for the world of Narnia just because she's beginning to mature into an adult and is no longer a child. Which is fine as far as it goes because it's a children's book and it's not about adult themes. But One Bright Star to Guide Them is exactly about adult themes. It's exactly about what kind of problems and temptations and corruption are pertinent to adults in the adult life. And so it takes a different tack. I'm not trying to impute that he was dissatisfied with the Chronicles of Narnia or that he thought it was bad or wrong. He just wanted to tell the tale of, in a moral universe, in a cosmology, and those are two different things, like the Chronicles of Narnia, what if we went a different direction and began talking about the consequences of being an adult and how that meshes with this sort of mythic worldview? And so what he's concentrating on then in the novella, to fulfill his artistic impulse behind writing it, is those very scenes where the characters are most dealing with the consequences of growing up and what kinds of things they might have done in their late teens and 20s and 30s to put them on this path to having abandoned the morality that they learned from Aslan and embraced the opposite morality, the morality that they defeated in the Winter King, the personage of the Winter King. And that's where he was interested in it, and that's what the book is about. But as far as being a whole adventure story, it lacks all the, for the most part, all of the adventure. That's not a criticism. It's not meant to slam it, but it is a frequent comment on it because one of his editors said that it is very rare you get people asking, by the way, I wish this book were longer. And in my mind, it isn't so much that people wish the book were longer just so it was longer. It's that comparing it to another more standard adventure story, you feel like you're missing all the adventure bits.
Well, if I could comment on that. I'm sorry, Darnell, did you have something?
Oh, I was just going to say, as someone who hasn't read the book, I know you said you didn't mean it as a criticism, but it sounds like what you're saying is that he took out all the fun bits and left all the dry bits. And so I want to know, I want you to respond to that.
I was going to. You read my mind, man. Yes. I largely agree with Daddy War Pig's summation there, but with any lesser writer, it would be dry. But have you ever heard Elmore Leonard's maxim that you cut out the parts that everybody skips? Notice how I don't know about you, but the number one complaint I have about that I hear about Lord of the Rings is, it's just a lot of walking. It's a travel log. You know, he describes them walking from here to there and there to here, and so those travel parts are gone from One Bright Star. And I think it really serves the story because the most conspicuous missing travel scene is from the point where Tommy agrees, okay, well, I'll go along with this talking cat, even though I think it's crazy. And then it skips ahead several weeks, and we now see him basically dressed like a modern-day equivalent of a ranger from Lord of the Rings, and having, gained some mystical secrets along the way. And we really didn't need to see him in the process of getting that stuff, because a lot of it would have just been him, walking across England for like 4 weeks.
I completely disagree.
Okay.
I would have loved to see him going across England with the cat, not the boring walking parts, but going across England with the cat, doing the things he needed to do to get these mystical secrets and get empowered by them, and just generally all of that stuff. And I understand why he left it out. He left it out not because it would be boring, but because it did not fit with the themes that he wanted to explore. It did not carry the thematic weight that the scenes he did write in full did. I understand why he left it out. I would have liked to have had those bits. And it recalls to mind Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, of course. I mean, yeah. Genius writer, just unbelievably genius writer. But a lot of the stuff that you could also have cut out in Neverwhere, like when they're crossing the bridge, that everything goes completely dark, and he's having that confrontation with fear and feeling like something's behind him and coming up on him. That would be a scene that, if it had been written in as part of One Bright Star to guide them, he wouldn't have included it. Wright wouldn't have included it, but yet it's still a great scene to read. I mean, I haven't read that book in almost 10 years now, and I still remember it. It's the first thing that popped into my mind when I thought about Neverwhere. I think those can be great scenes. I think those can be good scenes. I think those can be moving scenes, but they weren't carrying the thematic weight. And this is entirely a book written about specifically the themes that he wanted to address, which is, again, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm not saying it's boring. But it definitely, that stuff could have been in there, and in a more traditional book it would have.
Well, you're right. It's a thematic consideration. And here's the second part of why the book isn't dull, and I think it ties into why those scenes you talked about could have been safely excised and were, which is Wright has said that he primarily generates tension and conflict not through the threat of physical confrontation, but through moral dilemmas. So you're right on the theme. It's about, he likes to put characters in situations where, however powerful they are, they can't just use their powers and get out of the jam. They've got a moral dilemma in front of them. And that's what the story's all about. So yeah, we could have put the bridge scene into One Bright Star. Wright could have done that. But I think it would have detracted from where he confronts the first of his old buddies that he goes to try to recruit and faces his first serious moral test. I mean, we know all that we need to know. We know that he has, like Wright tells us, what he's gained and what secrets he's unlocked, and he's ready to face the moral challenge. And that's, like you said, this is fiction for adults. That's really the whole point, is the moral tests of the characters.
And I should also say this, as far as John Wright's philosophy of writing, and this is a blog post he threw up on his blog that I read, he's deliberately not trying to write for a large audience. He's not trying to write pop fantasy. He's not trying to write fantasy that's going to sell to a ton of people, or science fiction, because he also writes science fiction. His opinion is that as a writer, he wants to address these themes that he feels are important, that he feels are, in many cases, overlooked in the rest of the publishing industry. And if a book is only read by 900 people, then that's fine with him. He's okay with that, because as long as someone in that group of 900 people gets the point of what he's trying to write, is touched by it, their life is changed by it, then he feels like he has fulfilled his mission as an author. So he has a completely different idea of what he's trying to do than a lot of other authors do. And he gets that because, again, if I'm remembering the post right, there was actually a book that he discovered sitting on a remaindered shelf somewhere in a bookstore that did that for him. This book that was brilliant, that was genius, that was overlooked, but which had a huge impact on his life, and he would rather his books be something like that had been overlooked by the majority of people, but which touched other people's lives, than be a huge popular bestseller drained of all of its thematic import. So that's very much in line with his entire philosophy as an author. And Brian actually knows John C. Wright's thoughts on these subjects more than I do, so please, if I've misstated something, correct me.
No, you're spot on. In fact, I remember him saying that you could write a book and everyone could pan it. Every critic could get rejected by every editor, every publishing house. Even your mom, who's normally required to like your books, might say it's garbage, but then someday some grade school kid is going to find it on a shelf buried in the back of his school library, and it will become his favorite, most treasured book. And he said, yeah, he writes for that kid as a grown-up later in life as well. So I don't really think you can argue with that.
Speaking of which, by the way, I hope at some point to have Mr. Wright on the show, and so we can discuss like his books and his writing theory in more depth. We have had Larry Correia, who's a friend of his, a New York Times bestselling author, on the show. So I'm hoping at some point we can beg, plead, cry, what wine, whatever we need to do to get Mr. Wright on the show, because I think that would be a fascinating conversation, because this is why. This is the most imposing thing about John C. Wright. He is one of the most thoroughly educated people I know, conversant with obscure scientific, philosophical ideas, and yet he is also the biggest geek I have ever heard of, ever. He knows more about everything. He knows about comics, he knows about movies, he knows about TV shows from the 60s. He can tell you who played all three women that played Catwoman on the Burt West Batman TV series, the Bam Pow TV series. He knows about pulp novels that came out. He knows everything about geek culture, science fiction, fantasy, horror, weird fiction, which is sort of the junction of all three of those, and it's just really is really imposing for someone like me who thought, yeah, I'm pretty conversant with geek culture. I mean, I don't read all the comics, but I'm conversant with them, and then to run into the level of knowledge that he is both able to quote Aristotle's philosophies and Silver Surfer comics with equal facility, and you're just like, you know what, I quit, I give up, I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm just going to concentrate on the stuff I like, because I will never equal or beat his geekery. It just is stunning.
I think he's. I don't know if he's still listening though.
Well, he wouldn't be listening until later anyway. Until I send him the link after the show's over. Yeah, because honestly, I didn't want to send him the link to the live show, because if this was a complete disaster, if something technical went wrong, and this is absolutely embarrassing, I would just prefer then I can pretend like I wasn't going to do that and send him the link to another show. So that was my safety. Okay, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to shut up and let Dornall and Brian say anything else about the book that they want.
I don't have anything intelligent to say.
Okay.
It sounds like I might like it, or it sounds like something I might hate. I'm not sure there's an in-between here.
I would suspect that would hold for a great number of people, yes. Do you have anything to add, Brian?
Between the two of us, we honestly said more than I was expecting, so no, I think we covered that one.
Okay, so I want to talk about the show real quick. If you are noticing in the live show, you're going to see the new artwork, the Geek Gab artwork, right in the middle every time I talk, because I'm connecting as Geek Gab. I can't connect as my normal username. And then that is also the artwork that is on the YouTube channel page. It's also the artwork that shows up on our Google Plus page, and it's also the artwork that shows up on the Twitter account for this show. This is brand new artwork I commissioned, paid cash money for, got delivered last week, paid for it last week promptly and in full, because artists are worth the money you pay them, especially if they turn in art 4 days before they said they would. You pay them promptly, so if you need to buy art in the future, you have someone responsible and reliable to buy art from. I love it. I think it's awesome. You may not be able to see it just in the chat, but take a look at the channel. It enabled us to do all kinds of cool stuff. I got a cool custom URL for the channel. It's is.gd. That means is good /Geek Gab. So you can get right to the YouTube channel with that. If you go to the front of the YouTube channel, it has movies that the channel has favorited on YouTube that we think will be cool, that are geeky movies. It has the all of the episodes there in a scrolling list you can see, and it has the cool new artwork. If you haven't subscribed and you want to subscribe, because again, we had to move everything over. We've got all of our, this is our 14th episode. We've moved all the other 12 episodes over from our old home, so every episode of Geek Gab is now available in the channel. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a little square that says Geek Gab. If you mouse over it, you can subscribe right there. The reason why we're doing all this is because, in addition to the live show, we want to set up a podcast so that people can get Geek Gab, download it on their iPods. If they don't listen to it live, they can download it onto their iPods, iPhones, whatever, take it with them, catch up on all the shows, catch up on all the episodes. In order to do that, we needed cover art, which meant buying the art. We also want to get bumper music. I haven't found someone to do the bumper music yet. I've got some offers from several musicians. I want to check that out. But as soon as we get the bumper music, then we'll be starting and ending the shows with actual music instead of just me personally yelling, and we'll be adding it to iTunes as soon as they agree. So that's the future of the show, is a nice professional-looking YouTube channel with cool artwork. You can subscribe to Geek Gab Fest at Geek Gab Fest on Twitter, and that'll have all the updates to tell you when the show is. Subscribe here on YouTube. And by all means, if you like any of the shows, please feel free to comment. Please feel free to send them out. We have lost all the views on the shows when we moved over, which is sad because some of them had several thousand views, but we don't care. This looks nicer. It's easier for you to see. It's done for the audience, so everything is just everything we were doing is better. It's not as messy as it was before. So we are trying to make this as cool a podcast as possible. We're trying to make it as professional-looking a podcast as possible, despite the fact that we do it for free. Now, got that out of the way. That's business of the channel, Geek Gab. We're going to go on to the next topic. And the first topic was me and Brian because we had both read it. And the next topic is going to be me and Doranal because we have both read it. It is a novella by Patrick Rothfuss, and it's called The Slow Regard of Silent Things. And he should have seen this coming, but I'm betting he didn't. I'm going to let Doranal start off by describing the novella.
So this is a quick story about one of the minor characters in his famous King Killer Chronicles. The Name of the Wind is the first book in that. And what it is, the way it started is that he was supposed to write a quick short story for an anthology called Rogues with George R. R. Martin, Neil Gaiman, and a couple of other famous authors. And he wrote it about an extremely eccentric character found in the world, a waif of a girl named Ori who lives underneath the campus of the absolutely not Hogwarts. And it grew longer than he could fit into the anthology, and it turned out not to be really much of a roguish story because she's a little more eccentric than roguish. So he ended up fleshing this out over a while, and he did eventually publish it, but he didn't want to. And you'll have to check out his blog for the full story. But why it didn't almost get published is because it is weird. It's sort of written from the perspective of this character, and it doesn't do the things that a story should do. There's not so much plot as is just a sort of a window into the world and a description of this character. And so we basically spend a week, it's like a week in the life of this strange, peculiar person who lives off scraps, basically lives in the sewers. I'm doing the setting an injustice by calling it that. Makes her own soap, scrounges for food, just lives by herself. But so the book is strange, but it's also, I loved it actually. I thought it was really great. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm curious, since you just finished Daddy Warpig, I want to know what you think of it.
Yeah, I finished reading the book this morning because we had to do the show, and that was my job this morning, was to finish the book.
All work, no fun. Geek Gab.
I would never read a 300,000 word novel that was all like this. But it is 30,000 words, which means it's about a third the size of a typical novel and about a tenth the size of an epic fantasy novel. and it is quite interesting, and it's a good change of pace. That's the best way I can describe it is if you're used to eating steak and meat and potatoes regularly, sometimes it's a nice change of pace to go out and get Chinese or go out and get sushi or whatever. This is a change of pace story. It's not something you'd read all the time, but for something that is quirky and odd, which suits the main character, whose name's Ori, as something that's quirky and odd, it is perfectly fine to read it. There is no other human character in this story other than Ori. And there are mysteries presented in the story which are not answered and may never be answered in terms of the world, in terms of certain ideas and things the character does. There are things that happen to the character that you will not know if they are real because she's sensing something that it's a fantasy world, magic is real, and she may be sensing things that are magical, or she may actually just be insane. You do not know that. You will not get told that. But it was interesting. It held my attention. I did not get bored. I never once, while I was reading it, thought, oh man, this is dragging on. When are they going to get to the good stuff? And so, yeah, maybe that's just a testament to how good Rothfuss is as a storyteller, that he can keep you interested and entranced despite the fact that the typical stuff you expect from the King Killer Chronicles is not present.
I mean, he spends something like 8 pages describing her making soap.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, and I want to tell you why. It's not the Clan of the Cave Bear where they tell you specifically how to nap flint, and it's all mundane. When she's making this soap, she's dealing with possibly mystical forces or possibly her own insanity. And so at one point, she realizes that this soap is filled with rage, filled with anger, filled with violence. And she has to leach all of that out of the soap, and so she has to go and do something which is a little bit odd, which you would not expect, that ties into events earlier in the story. So the question you have is this real, or is this her insanity? And you never get an answer. That's never told to you.
And what makes it especially rewarding for people who have been following the King Killer Chronicles is the plausibility that it's real. I mean, obviously she's crazy, but it's implied that she is or could be a master magician, and in the world, a master namer, and something, she obviously went over the deep end at some point a long time ago, right? It's also implied that magic is one of those worlds where sort of magic sort of it flows through the world and can control the course of events, and it's implied that she's literally in tune with the world, and that's what makes the writing so much fun, because is she just crazy, or is she really that in tune with the way things are, or the way things ought to be?
Yeah, and there's a lot of, if you've read the books and you're wondering about who Ori is, where she comes from, how she survives, things like that, you learn, if you're paying attention, you learn a lot about what happens. There is one sentence buried in the middle of this novella that tells you why she went insane. If you're paying attention and you catch it and you go, oh, geez, here's what that implies, and I could see where it goes insane. And then that one sentence fits together with what happens with the rage that I was just talking about, trying to leach it out of the soap. What she thinks about when she perceives this rage, that fits together with this other sentence, completely different part of the novella, that gives you a really good idea of what happened to her without putting it out there, even in a subtle way. It's not even subtly there. It's just buried. But you can unearth it if you're paying attention. It's it's very impressively done, just from a sheer technical standpoint. Just take a step back from loving the characters and loving the world. Just from a sheer technical standpoint, it is. I found it very impressive. That's a cold-hearted endorsement, but it's true if you're looking at it on that level. So.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about the. I was just I'm trying to get my father to read Name of the Wind, and I was just trying to say that the it's a generic fantasy world, but I mean it's the execution. Rothfuss is a really good writer, and he really brings that world to life, and it's not. It's not necessarily all excitement and flashbangs and everything. It's just he cares, and he puts the detail into the work, and it really.
And he does. If you read his blog, he puts a ton of detail into preparing the world and preparing things. That's just almost obsessive, but doesn't put it in the books so he doesn't overwhelm the reader. He just makes sure that what he says in the books matches with what he has written in the background and doesn't overwhelm you with info dumps and other stuff. So on his blog, he was talking about the second book in the trilogy and how he has a complete calendar of months and how things work as far as time goes, and he went through every single day and every single time period and made sure that everything happened in strict accordance with the calendar, the start of school term, the end of school term, him leaving the school and going to spend some time abroad, so on and so forth, but doesn't give you any of that in the book so you're not overwhelmed with it because you're going to be bored and Momo certainly won't care. But it's there. He put care into the world, into developing the world, just so it can be internally consistent without feeling the need that a lot of new authors get, which is to brag about how clever their world building is. He doesn't do that. He just lets the world be the world.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm sure, like, for example, I'm sure Brian does plenty of clever world building for the D&D game or something, but it doesn't mean that he has to. I mean, if he sat down with his players and spelled out every cool, clever nuance, the mystery would be gone. It wouldn't be as interesting anymore.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think that you'd be right, although I'm probably the poorest judge of that. Also, you guys haven't read any of my fantasy space opera novels yet. My editor, who is actually John C. Wright's wife, L.J. Lamplighter, kind of chided me in her notes after she'd edited one of my drafts that I wasn't giving enough detail, actually. So, excuse me, yeah. Go ahead.
And you know what? I get the impression from his blog that Patrick Rothfuss has some pretty brutal editors and beta readers that really help him keep his stuff straight.
Brutal beta readers are a gift from God.
Amen.
Okay. Any other? I thought there was a good chance we were gonna run long and have to cut off some things. So, any other questions about the slow regard of silent things before we move on to the next topic?
I just wanted to say something about this. I couldn't break it up. It's a short book. Give yourself a couple hours to read it. I finished it on a plane ride. Coming back from New Orleans. I tried to do the thing where you put it in the reading room and you get to it a few pages at a time. You're not going to get through this novella that way. Just sit and read it. And I recommend that everybody, if you're familiar with if you're not familiar with the King Killer stuff, just read Name of the Wind and then read this.
Okay, I would agree. Actually, I liked all three of the books. Penny Arcade even did a funny comic about the second book, so you might want to see if you can look that up. Oh, come on. This is the sort of thing that I'm going to have to put in the notes, isn't it? I mentioned it, now I have to dig up the link and put it in the notes. Damn it. I need to keep my mouth shut when I mention random stuff on the net. Okay. Third topic is a Seventh Son the movie. Which I think I'm the only one of the three of us that has seen it. Am I wrong?
I haven't seen it.
I have not seen it.
Okay. So here we go. Seventh Son, the movie, has Jeff Bridges, Julianne Moore, and a woman named Anchi Trau, who you will only know because she was in Man of Steel. She played the hot Kryptonian warrior with the really short haircut. Those are the three main actors in it. Jon Snow from the A Song of Ice and Fire, or excuse me, Game of Thrones, the HBO TV show. You Know Nothing, Jon Snow. He's in there in a bit part. And
everybody take a drink.
Do you have to take a drink every time a Wheel of Time? Wheel of Time. Anytime a Game of Thrones actor shows up?
No, every time someone in a Game of Thrones says, "You know nothing, Jon Snow," drink again.
Oh.
You'll die of alcohol poisoning by the end of season 2. It's great.
And I could give you a long summary of the plot, but I don't really want to. This is another movie that I went to that I didn't get to really enjoy because I was taking notes the whole time, specifically for this show. I'm going to tell you what it's about because you find all this stuff up right at the beginning. Jeff Bridges plays a fantasy version of the bounty hunter from True Grit. So, if you've seen True Grit, 2010, I think it was, which is, 5 years ago? Oh, man. I've wasted 5 years of my life. 5 years of my life just disappeared, because True Grit is a great movie. If you've seen it, Jeff Bridges plays that exact same character, only he's in a fantasy world, and instead of hunting down outlaws, he hunts down witches.
No, that's some great continuity. I gotta jump in there because I just had the greatest picture ever. So True Grit is a remake of a John Wayne movie.
Yes.
So now in my mind's eye, I see John Wayne in a fantasy novel hunting down witches, and it's beautiful.
That would be an interesting movie. I would watch that movie. If what's his name, the Crazy Millionaire, had been a little bit more into Tolkien, we might have gotten that movie. That's too bad. The man who built the Spruce Goose, I can't remember his name. In any case.
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes, yes. If Howard Hughes had been a little bit more into Tolkien, John Wayne might have done that. That would have been cool.
It's just the sign of the times. Westerns were popular back then, and fantasy was not. And they've traded places. It's too bad. I like Westerns.
I'm going to say the single best thing about this movie, the single thing that impressed me most about this movie is this. It is not blue and orange. And I just love that, especially after seeing so many blue and orange movies over the last year. The fact that this movie is not blue and orange was a godsend. What it is the Lord of the Rings. The same forests, the same mountain shots, the same them walking across a meadow with the forests and the mountains within the background, the same running through the forest, fighting things, things like that. It is clearly meant to appeal to the Lord of the Rings crowd. And the problem is the movie sucks. It's a bad movie. It's not terrible. It's not Manos Hands of Fate. It's just mediocre and not very well done. He hunts witches, his apprentice gets killed, and he goes and finds a new apprentice. In order to be a witch hunter in this world, you have to be the seventh son of a seventh son, which is at least traditional. In folklore, the seventh son of a seventh son is born with great magical ability. Orson Scott Card borrowed this to use in his novel, Seventh Son, and the first time I heard there was a movie coming out called Seventh Son, I thought, what, Orson Scott Card sold that? No, it is not the Orson Scott Card novel. And Bridges is called a spook. He's a monster hunter. Spooks go around hunting witches, hunting monsters, hunting all kinds of badness, all kinds of otherworldly is the exact term they use, badness, and you spend the rest of the movie along with Bridges and his new apprentice on a spook hunt. This is the difficulty with the movie. A couple of weeks ago, or it may have been last week, we discussed the people who make South Park did a presentation for a university that got broadcast on an MTV video online. You can check it out online. I have to do that link now. I need to stop talking about stuff I've seen online.
How you know when you have a problem?
They said that in any fictional work, you have multiple scenes, and what you absolutely must have between these scenes is scene A and therefore scene B, or scene A but scene B, because that implies or establishes a logical causality. Things that happen in one scene directly cause things that happen in the next scene. So let's go to RoboCop real quick. RoboCop gets blown away in a gang, a hideout. And because of that, therefore, he gets taken into the hospital and cyborged and becomes RoboCop. All right? That's a direct causal link. Or you can have a but, which at one point RoboCop seems to be winning against the evil gang, and he goes in and raids their cocaine factory, busts it up, arrests Clarence Boddicker, but in the next scene, Dick Jones, the evil corporate guy, hires Clarence Boddicker and gives him military spec weapons and a tracker to hunt down RoboCop, okay? That's a but. One scene, but this other thing happens to complicate the story. That's it. That's the linkage. If you have scene A and then scene B, there's no causal linkage, there's no plot, there's no story. It's just random things happening after another because they're cool. Which brings me back to Seventh Son. Seventh Son falls into the same problem that so many modern movies fall into, which is a series of and then scenes. One scene will happen, and then another, and nothing before led up to that scene, and nothing after comes from that scene. The scene, other than stuff that happens, doesn't really matter. For example, the very first monster hunting scene in the movie is a young girl who's been possessed. And it turns out she's been possessed by a witch. But never in the rest of the movie do you ever hear about how this possession happened, how possessions in general happen, how possessions in general operate, how you tell if someone is possessed, what are the limits of possession, or indeed the word possession is never mentioned again. You never see anybody possessed. The scene exists in complete isolation from the entire rest of the movie. And that's a problem. It leads to long, confusing movies that don't really feel like stories because they're not stories. They're just a sequence of events. And everything in the movie is diminished because there's no logic to the plot, no logic to the story, no real world building going on. There's all kinds of questions that are raised that are never get answered, which is why Jeff Bridges, who is an incredible actor, turns in at best a performance that you can be called phoning it in. He just seems to have gone back to that true grit character and relies on that character's verbal and physical tics for his entire performance in the movie, and it's just not impressive, and I know Jeff Bridges can do better. So I would not recommend going and seeing this unless you are planning on being a professional writer and want to see how to do it wrong. Why a series of and then scenes are bad for a story. I'm going to pause and let you guys ask questions or say anything if you feel like it.
Well, I haven't seen it yet. It sounds like it violates, speaking of South Park, Matt Trey's and then rule.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm a South Park noob.
But
Oh.
I found the movie disappointing. Not surprisingly disappointing because looking at the trailers, I just wasn't excited to go see it, and I have found over the last several years that if I'm not excited, if I don't feel any sense of excitement that a movie is coming up, even a little bit, there's a good chance it'll be crap. Now, that doesn't mean that every movie I'm excited about is great. It just means if I read about it or see trailers or whatever, and I'm not excited, there's a good chance it is actually crap. I don't know that I've ever had that play me false.
Well, Bradford Walker in the chat gives a good rule of thumb. If it's a genre film being released during award season, that usually means it's crap.
They just dump them off, don't they?
Oh,
they did the same thing with Jupiter Ascending. I remember we had some lively discussion about that last week.
Yes.
Same deal, genre film, award season.
I don't know if you guys ever watch Red Letter Media. Actually, I think you did mention that you do, but they've got a segment called F you, it's January, because that's what the movie studios say.
Oh, and they're just talking about movies that get released in January, that get dumped in January.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. It is unfortunate. January is a dumping ground for movies, which is why there was a movie that came out in January. Was it American Sniper that did really, really, really well? Or was it another movie? It grabbed people, and a lot of people were watching it, and it made a lot more money than they thought it would, which was a surprise because, I mean, usually that's a really good sign that the studio at least doesn't think it's a great movie. Is that it was relegated to January release. Let me see.
I mean, that's how it would be not a touch.
Oh man, it was sad too. Speaking of trailers and being disappointed, I also took notes on trailers. Not that they really fit into the theme of the show, but I want to say this. There was a good chance we weren't going to get to everything, which is why I put in the notes. We're planning on, but not promising to talk about all of this stuff because I knew there was a good chance we wouldn't get to the end of the list, and in fact, we haven't. We were planning on talking about Hearthstone and Dragon Age Inquisition. We didn't get to that this show. We'll see if, again, not promising anything. We may be able to go back and revisit those in a future show. That'll give me more of a chance to play Inquisition because I've played like an hour of it, which is barely enough to get you through the beginning cutscenes.
Well, I mean, nobody wants to talk about video games anyway. They're for losers and nerd virgins.
People with money.
The trailers I took notes on, there was most of them were trailers I had already seen, and the ones that weren't trailers I had already seen looked bad. Poltergeist looks like a terrible idea, a lifeless remake of the original, and I just saw the original on Halloween, actually. On Halloween Day I watched it because they were having a sale on good horror movies, so I bought it. Tomorrowland actually looks like it might be good. That was the one exception. Everybody's excited about Chappie. I don't know. It's a robot come to life movie.
No, fuck that movie. I'm going to tell you why. because that whole trailer, that whole opening trailer, all the sound bites and the clips and everything set up Hugh Mullet Man Jackman as the good guy, and then all of a sudden, like the guy from Who Wants to Be Millionaire, that Slumdog Millionaire, he pulls the bot out, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, no, it's Johnny Five. We're supposed to be rooting for the robot. Meanwhile, I don't know. I'm gonna have to become more eloquent about this because it viscerally bothered me. That trailer bothered me because by the end of the trailer it was obvious that Chappie was the good guy. But I spent the whole trailer thinking, yeah, this Hugh Jackman guy is right. What are they doing? Haven't they seen RoboCop? This is the worst idea ever.
See, and I knew Hugh Jackman was supposed to be the. We may have seen different trailers. They've got a couple of them, so we may have actually seen different trailers for the movie. I knew he was supposed to be the bad guy from the beginning of the trailer when I first saw him popping up.
Well, he's got a mullet. Of course, he's supposed to be the bad guy.
Well, and he's like the rich guy, and of course he's the bad guy. He's rich. Rich people are always the bad guys. So that the fact that he turned out to be the bad guy later in the trailer didn't surprise me. I was expecting that. Okay. Well,
really.
Go ahead, please finish.
If I can get a quick comment.
Sure.
Yeah, with Neil Blomkamp, I was fully with him for District 9. It was fresh. It was a breath of fresh air in sci-fi that I really appreciated. I stuck with him for Elysium mainly because of Charlton Copley, but yeah, I agree with Tornall that the trailer for Chappie just makes me think this guy is pretty much one note here.
Did he direct?
Like, so the whole class
Chappie?
warfare theme.
Yeah,
it's Neil Blomkamp.
I did not know that. He just 4 weeks ago he released a bunch of concept art for an Aliens movie that he said he was playing around with at some point, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's so cool!" It got passed around the Geekosphere, and then just this week, like 4 days ago, it turns out that Fox is hiring him to actually make that Aliens movie that's supposed to happen chronologically after Prometheus 2. So that's his next project, is an Aliens movie. I don't know how that's going to work. That's just what it's an official announcement. He's officially announced it on Twitter. He's making the next Alien movie. So.
Well, of course, because he can use Wayland Yutani as the villains. He doesn't have to modify his themes at all. I don't know. I'll give it a chance.
Okay, we do have to go. This is an hour, and so we are out of time. Thanks, everybody, for coming in the live chat. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show later. I hope and pray in the next couple of weeks I'll get bumper music put together and we can start doing start this as a podcast. So if you want to listen to the show on your iPod or something while you're working, you can do that easily instead of just coming to YouTube. This is Geek Gab, live show once a week, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anything geekish goes. This was the Fantasy Festival episode. I have no idea what we're going to be doing for next week, as we will try to get some things lined up. It may, in point of fact, be Hearthstone and Dragon Age Inquisition, but I would not bet on that. Things go wonky around the Geek Gab headquarters. You can check us out. Our Twitter handles are in the description to the video. I'm going to add liner notes, add links to the couple of things I mentioned. Those will also be in the description. You can read the House of Geekery blog, daddywarpig.com. You can subscribe to the show, or there's like 50 different social media buttons down there. Retweet it, send it on a Facebook, whatever. Let your friends know. If you like the show, if you want them to share in the sheer joy of Geek Gab, please do so. We're your hosts, Dornall, Brian Niemeyer, and Daddy Warpig, signing off. We will be back.